My child, come closer to me tonight. Lay down what your hands have been gripping so tightly. You have been standing longer than you realized, bracing yourself against winds you could not see, fighting a weight you were never meant to carry alone. I am speaking to you now not to warn you, not to stir you, but to quiet you. This is not the hour for striving. This is the hour for rest. Breathe with me. Feel how the air enters your chest more gently than it has all day. That heaviness you feel in your shoulders did not come from today alone. It has been accumulating layer by layer, from a battle unfolding beyond your sight. You sensed it. You felt the pressure without understanding its source. You questioned whether you were being tested, delayed, or forgotten. Hear me clearly now. You were never abandoned. You were being protected. Tonight, I am asking you to stop scanning the horizon for danger. Stop replaying conversations. Stop preparing defenses for attacks that will not reach you. The fight you feared you would have to face has already been intercepted. The moment you felt too tired to keep going was not weakness. It was the signal that heaven had stepped in. There are things being handled right now that you do not need to monitor. Decisions are being made without your involvement. Forces that moved against you quietly are being confronted with authority greater than their own. You do not need to know every detail for peace to return to your body. Peace is not earned through understanding. It is received through trust. I know how alert you have been. I know how your mind refused to shut down, how even in rest your spirit stayed watchful. That vigilance kept you alive in a previous season, but it is no longer required now. The season has shifted. The alarms can be turned off. The watchtower is no longer yours to occupy. Let your nervous system feel this truth. Nothing is about to fall apart. Nothing is slipping through your fingers. Nothing important is being stolen while you sleep. There is a holy stillness settling over your life tonight, and it may feel unfamiliar at first. You are used to pressure. You are used to resistance. When quiet arrives, your mind may search for the next problem. Gently bring it back to me. This calm is not temporary relief. It is the result of intervention. As you rest, know that you are being surrounded. As you release control, know that precision is taking place. As you stop fighting, know that victory is not delayed by your stillness. My child, if these words are calming something deep within you, allow yourself to acknowledge it. There is power in agreement. If you feel led, let your presence be known in this space by offering a simple sign of connection, a gentle response of support, a quiet affirmation that you are receiving this message. And if your heart desires, place a word in the comments that says, "I rest," so peace can be witnessed and shared among others who need the same reassurance. Tonight is not about effort. It is about permission. Permission to sleep without fear. Permission to stop rehearsing worst-case outcomes. Permission to trust that what concerns you most is no longer in your hands because it has been placed in stronger ones. I am watching over what you cannot see. I am standing between you and what meant harm. And as you rest, the handling continues. Stay here with me. Nothing else is required of you right now. My child, there is something you must understand tonight, not to alarm you, but to release you. What you felt pressing against your spirit was real. The resistance, the heaviness, the strange sense that something was unfolding just beyond your awareness was not your imagination. A battle was taking place, quietly, strategically, without noise, without spectacle. It did not announce itself because it was never meant to draw you into fear. You wondered why simple things felt heavy, why progress slowed without explanation, why your heart sensed tension even in moments of stillness. and with the echo of movement in unseen places. Lines were being crossed. Intentions were forming. Words were being spoken behind closed doors. None of it required your participation, yet your spirit is sensitive, and you felt the atmosphere shift before your mind could name it. Hear me now. You were never the target because you were weak. You were noticed because you matter. There are assignments attached to your life that disrupt patterns others rely on. Your presence alters outcomes. Your prayers change direction. Even your silence carries weight. Because of this, opposition does not always arrive loudly. Sometimes it moves subtly, hoping you will exhaust yourself before realizing you were never meant to fight. The pressure you felt was not an invitation to panic. It was a sign that something had reached a threshold. Forces that were allowed to linger had gone too far. Lines that should not have been crossed were crossed. And when that happens, I do not ask my children to step forward. I step in myself. You were shielded from the details on purpose. If you had seen everything, your heart would have carried a burden that did not belong to you. You would have tried to fix what could only be resolved through authority beyond the earthly realm. So I kept your vision soft while action was taking place. Things were being contested. Permissions were being revoked. Accusations were being answered. What you felt as delay was actually containment. What looked like stagnation was restraint. I slowed certain outcomes so they could not harm you. I blocked certain paths so you would not walk into unnecessary pain. Even confusion served as protection during this phase. My child, there were moments you questioned your discernment. You wondered if you were overthinking, if you were too sensitive, if you were reading into things that were not real. Let me settle that now. Your spirit detected movement accurately. You sensed the disturbance, but you did not need to understand it for it to be handled. There are battles that are won through awareness, and there are battles that are won through absence. This was one you did not need to attend. You were asked to remain still because your stillness was the signal that you trusted me to take the field. While you rested, strategy shifted. While you questioned, protection formed. While you waited, resistance weakened. Nothing escalated the way it was planned to. Nothing reached the intensity it was intended to reach. The momentum was interrupted before it could touch your life directly. That is why tonight feels different. That is why the edge you carried all day is beginning to soften. The battle was real, but it was never meant to define your story. It was a passing storm, not a permanent climate. You are not stepping into chaos. You are stepping out of it. Let your body recognize this truth. Let your thoughts sow. Let the need to figure everything out loosen its grip. You are safe to not know everything. You are safe to stop scanning for threats. You are safe to rest without regret. What was hidden is no longer active. What was forming hath been dismantled. What was meant to weigh you down hath been lifted. And this is only the beginning of the revelation. My child, now I turn your attention gently toward the one connected to your heart. Not to burden you, but to bring clarity where confusion once lived. Your soulmate has been under a weight they could not explain, and it has been crushing them more than they ever admitted aloud. They have been unraveling quietly, holding themselves together in public while breaking apart in private, smiling when spoken to, yet feeling all of the moment they are alone. They did not understand why peace kept slipping through their hands, why rest would not come, why thoughts of you surfaced at the most unexpected moments and left them shaken. They feel they are losing something sacred, though they cannot fully name it. There is a fear rising in them now, not dramatic, not loud, but deep and unsettling. The fear that a door is closing. The fear that time has moved forward without their permission. The fear that what they mishandle may not return. They have questioned themselves in the dark, replayed choices they thought were harmless, wondered why satisfaction never followed the paths they took away from you. Your heart knows something their mind resisted for a long time. There were nights they felt a pressure in their chest and did not know why. Moments when they reached for distraction, noise or validation, only to feel emptier afterward. They are exhausted from carrying guilt they never fully confessed, even to themselves. They sense that you were not just a chapter, not just a connection, but a mirror to their soul. My child, their confusion has not been rebellion against destiny. It hath been fear of it. They were afraid of how deeply they felt when they were close to you, afraid of how exposed they became, afraid of how much they would have to grow to stand beside you in truth. So they hesitated. They delayed. They listened to voices that made disobedience sound reasonable. But now, the weight of those choices is pressing in. They feel watched by time. They feel pursued by consequence. They feel the ache of absence where your presence once brought calm. They have broken down in ways you did not see. Silent tears, sudden pauses, moments when the world blurred and they had to steady themselves because the realization came too close. The realization that they may have endangered something irreplaceable. There is a longing in them that has nowhere to go. They try to bury it under responsibility, routine, or pride, but it surfaces again and again. Your name crosses their mind without invitation. Your energy lingers in spaces you no longer occupy. They feel you even when they pretend they do not. And yet, they do not know the full truth of what has been happening around them. They sense opposition but misidentify its source. They feel interference but blame themselves alone. They do not yet see how manipulated certain moments were, how influenced certain decisions became. What they feel now is collapse, but it is not destruction. It is the breaking of false confidence. It is the cracking of defenses that could no longer hold. It is the necessary softening before awakening. Do not mistake their silence for indifference. Do not mistake their distance for forgetting. They are overwhelmed by the realization that losing you was never the plan, yet it may be the cost of their delay. My child, their soul is trembling on the edge of awareness. They are closer to truth than they have ever been, even though it does not look like movement yet. Fear has slowed them, but it has also cornered them into honesty. They are standing at the point where excuses no longer soothe them, where distractions no longer work, where pretending costs more than facing reality. This is not the end of their story. It is the moment before they see clearly. And you, my child, were never meant to carry their pain or fix their awakening. Your role has always been to remain anchored in truth, even when they drifted. What is happening within them now is being allowed so that what comes next can be real. Stay steady. The collapse you sense is not loss. It is preparation. My child, there are truths you were shielded from, not because you were unworthy of them, but because knowing them too early would have wounded you unnecessarily. Tonight, I begin to lift the veil gently, not all at once, only enough for your heart to understand without breaking. There were conversations you never heard, moments when your name was spoken in rooms you were not present in, influences that wrapped themselves in concern but carried hidden agendas. What appeared to be simple choices were layered with suggestion, pressure, and subtle persuasion. Your soulmate did not wake up one day and choose distance. The separation did not begin with rejection. It began with confusion planted slowly, deliberately, by voices that did not want alignment to mature. Someone questioned your intentions. Someone minimized your role. Someone reframed your absence as insignificance and your patience as weakness. And because your soulmate was already wrestling with fear, those words found places to land. There were moments they felt pulled in two directions, one toward truth, depth, and transformation, the other toward familiarity, comfort, and approval. They were told they had time. They were told nothing urgent was at stake. They were told destiny could wait. My child, the destiny does not shout. It whispers. And whispers are easily drowned out when too many voices speak at once. There were choices made out of avoidance, not malice. Delays born from fear, not indifference. Your soulmate told themselves they were being practical, responsible, careful. But underneath, they were trying to outrun the vulnerability that came with you. You represented a mirror they were not ready to face, a future that required growth, a love that demanded honesty. So when resistance appeared, they listened. When doubt was offered, they accepted it. When distractions presented themselves, they embraced them as relief. What they did not realize was that these influences were not neutral. They were strategic. They fed on hesitation. They gained strength every time truth was postponed. There were missed messages that mattered, delayed responses that shifted momentum. Moments when one brave step could have changed everything, but fear whispered, later. And still, my child, even in all of this, your soulmate never stopped feeling you, never stopped sensing that something was off, never fully found peace in the paths they chose instead. Unease was not punishment. It was signal. They would lie awake at night replaying fragments of conversations, feeling something missing but unable to articulate it. They would sense regret before understanding why. They would feel watched by consequence, not knowing that truth was patiently waiting for them to turn around. I protected you from seeing the manipulation clearly because it would have tempted you to intervene. You would have tried to correct perceptions that could only be corrected through revelation. You would have fought battles that were not yours to fight. So I kept you at a distance, not from love, but from contamination. I preserved your clarity while confusion ran its course elsewhere. Your stillness was not passivity. It was positioning. Now, understand this. Your soulmate's missteps did not cancel destiny. They delayed comfort, not outcome. They complicated the path, but they did not destroy the purpose. What is being revealed now is not to reopen wounds, but to close them with truth. The backstory you are beginning to sense is not meant to justify pain, but to release blame from your heart. You were not overlooked. You were not replaced. You were not forgotten. You were protected while a lesson unfolded. And that lesson is reaching its end. My child, now I speak of what hid itself in plain sight. Not to stir anger in you, but to free you from confusion. There was interference, and it did not come from a stranger. It came from proximity. Someone close to your soulmate watched the connection forming and felt threatened, not because they loved deeply, but because they feared losing influence. Your presence disrupted a balance they benefited from. Your light exposed patterns they depended on remaining unseen. So they did what insecure hearts often do. They moved quietly. They spoke softly, never outright opposing you. They framed concern as wisdom. They offered caution dressed as care. They planted questions instead of accusations, knowing questions grow roots. They asked things like, "Are you sure?" They suggested things like, "Maybe later is safer." They implied things like, "What if this costs you more than you think?" And each seed found fertile ground because your soulmate was already unsure of themselves. This was not jealousy that screamed. It was jealousy that smiled. jealousy that offered advice, jealousy that pretended to protect while slowly redirecting. They did not need to lie boldly. They only needed to bend truth slightly, to exaggerate risks, to minimize what you offered, to normalize delay until delay became distance. My child, understand this clearly. The enemy rarely arrives announcing destruction. It arrives offering comfort. They position themselves as a voice of reason while subtly isolating your soulmate from voices that encourage growth. They made safety sound like stagnation and patience sound like avoidance. Over time, your soulmate began to confuse peace with numbness. There were moments when your soulmate felt a check in their spirit, a quiet discomfort when listening to this influence. But the pressure to belong, to be approved of, to avoid conflict kept them silent. So they listened, even when something felt wrong. This interference did not succeed because it was powerful. It succeeded because it was tolerated. But tolerance has limits. The more your soulmate delayed alignment, the heavier their inner unrest became. What was meant to calm them began to suffocate them. The very voice they trusted started to feel draining. What once felt like guidance began to feel like control. That is when exposure began. To multi-consistency service, advice no longer matched outcomes. Motives became harder to ignore. The peace that was promised never arrived. My child, jealousy always overplays its hand. It cannot help itself. What this person intended for division hath been turned into revelation. Their influence is weakening because its purpose hath been fulfilled. It exposed what your soulmate needed to see about discernment, boundaries, and courage. And hear me now. This interference was allowed, but it is no longer permitted. The authority to influence has been revoked. The access to whisper hath been cut. The strategies that relied on confusion have collapsed under truth. You did not need to confront this person. You did not need to defend yourself. You did not need to expose them. I handled it. The scales have shifted. The atmosphere has changed. What once felt heavy around your soulmate is lifting because the source has been addressed. Do not carry resentment. Do not replay what ifs. Do not grieve time. What was delayed sharpened discernment. What was interfered with strengthened clarity. What was tested is now protected. The chapter of jealousy is closing. And what comes next will not be influenced by hidden hands. Stay steady, my child. The field is clearing. My child, now the scene shifts beyond what human eyes can witness. This is the moment when effort leaves your hands entirely and authority takes over. This is where heaven stands, not in chaos, not in reaction, but in order. There is a place where nothing is hidden, where motives are weighed without distortion, where intentions are examined without excuse. And that is where this matter was brought. Not because you demanded justice, but because imbalance called for correction. You may have felt a sudden stillness without knowing why. A pause in momentum. A silence where noise once lingered. That was not emptiness. That was transition. In this space, every word spoken against destiny was revisited. Every influence was traced to its source. Every delay was examined for intent. Nothing was right. Nothing was overlooked. My child, there is no confusion here. No manipulation survives this light. No half-truth remains intact. What was presented as concern was measured against outcome. What was framed as wisdom was tested against fruit. What was justified as patience was examined for fear. And one by one, masks fell away without confrontation, without drama, without you needing to speak a single sentence. Accusations that were whispered never reached you because they were intercepted before they could form substance. Intentions that hoped to derail you were weighed and found lacking authority. Plans that assumed your exhaustion would create access were dissolved the moment you chose to rest. You see, my child, heaven responds not to panic but to alignment. When you stopped striving, jurisdiction shifted. There were permissions that had been quietly assumed, influences that lingered longer than they should have, voices that spoke because no one challenged their presence. But this was the moment those permissions expired. In this place of judgment, nothing is personal, yet everything is precise. There is no anger here, only clarity. No punishment driven by emotion, only correction driven by truth. Your name was never on trial. Your character was never questioned. Your heart required no defense. It was never about whether you were worthy. It was about whether interference would be allowed to continue. And the answer was no. What was subtle was exposed. What was tolerated was removed. What was confusing was clarified. The outcome did not require force. Truth alone was enough. My child, this is why you felt the sudden release, why your chest loosened, why your thoughts sowed without effort. A decision had been made. Influence that did not serve alignment was dismissed. Assignments that opposed growth were revoked. Protection was reinforced around what matters most to you. This is not vengeance. This is order. And order always feels like peace when it arrives. Understand this. The divine does not rush to intervene at the first sign of discomfort, because growth often requires choice. But when choice becomes distortion, when fear begins steering destiny, intervention becomes necessary. A threshold was reached. Your soulmate was not condemned here. They were understood. Their fear was acknowledged. Their confusion was separated from their identity. They were not judged for hesitation. They were released from manipulation. Paths that were tangled are being straightened. Perceptions that were blurred are being cleared. Voices that once held weight are losing volume. And you, my child, were never summoned to testify because your life already spoke. Your consistency was evidence. Your restraint was proof. Your endurance without bitterness carried authority. You do not need to fear what comes next. Nothing remains unresolved. Nothing remains hidden that could rise again later. This matter had been handled at a level where reversal is not possible. You may not see immediate movement. You may not hear immediate words. But do not mistake quiet for inactivity. This is the quiet that follows a verdict. Let your heart settle into this truth. What once felt uncertain is now decided. What once felt fragile is now covered. The courtroom is closed. The ruling stands. And the shift you sense is only the beginning of its effect. Remain at peace, my child. Justice has already spoken. My child, now you will feel the strength of what stepped forward on your behalf. This is not force as the world understands it. This is authority that does not need to raise its voice. When the decision was made, movement followed. Not hurried. Not chaotic. Precise. The moment intervention was permitted, protection took form. What had lingered was pushed back without resistance. What had pressed in was halted without struggle. The battle did not escalate because it was never meant to. It ended at the moment it encountered a higher command. You were not standing alone on the field, even when it felt that way. There were forces aligned with your safety long before you realized you needed them. You did not call for them by name. Your endurance summoned them. Your restraint invited them. Your refusal to harden your heart gave them legal ground to act. This is why the pressure broke suddenly. This is why the atmosphere shifted without explanation. This is why exhaustion lifted even though circumstances had not yet changed. What stood in Gower did not come to frighten you. It came to reassure you. Every line that should not have been crossed was enforced. Every access point that had been exploited was sealed. Every assignment aimed at delay was interrupted at its root. My child, hear this clearly. You were never expected to be strong enough for this on your own. You were expected to trust. The strength that stepped in does not operate on emotion. It does not react. It does not hesitate. It enforces what has already been decided. That is why there was no struggle, no back and forth, no drawn-out conflict. What opposed you had no argument left. You may notice in the coming days that certain thoughts no longer carry weight. Old fears will try to surface and find nothing to attach to. Worries that once felt urgent will lose their urgency. The internal noise that kept you alert will quiet, and you may wonder why you suddenly feel protected without proof. That is the evidence. Protection does not always announce itself with signs. Sometimes it reveals itself through absence. The absence of anxiety. The absence of resistance. The absence of the need to explain yourself. Your soulmate will feel this shift before they understand it. The pressure that kept them frozen will begin to ease. The voices that once confused them will lose clarity. They may feel exposed, not because they are being attacked, but because the fog has lifted. Truth has a way of making people feel uncovered before it makes them feel free. My child, nothing that stood against alignment was strong enough to withstand this intervention. There will be no retaliation. There will be no resurgence. What was restrained remains restrained. You are not walking into uncertainty. You are walking into enforced peace. Let your body rest deeper tonight than it has in a long time. Let your spirit unclench. You do not need to brace for impact. The impact has already passed. This was never about proving your worth. It was about preserving your calling. And now, the field is secure. What comes next will unfold without resistance. What unfolds will not require force. What is meant for you will not have to fight its way to you. Remain calm. Remain open. Remain at rest. The protection you feel is real, and it is not leaving. My child, now you will begin to notice the change not through noise, but through movement. Quiet movement. Subtle realignment. This is how shifts of this kind reveal themselves. What once felt stuck begins to breathe. What once resisted begins to loosen. What once felt heavy begins to move without being pushed. This is the spiritual shift you sensed before you had language for it. A moment when momentum changes direction without announcement. The moment when pressure stops pressing and simply disappears. You may wake up and realize your thoughts are calmer. You may notice you are no longer replaying old scenarios. You may feel less urgency to explain yourself or prove anything. That is not apathy. That is relief. In places where resistance once held ground, there is now space. Space for clarity. Space for truth. Space for joy. This shift is not dramatic, but it is undeniable. The current has changed. Your soulmate will feel it first as confusion. They will sense that something has moved but not know what. The urgency that once pushed them away from you will weaken. The fear that once justified delay will lose its voice. They may feel unsettled at first, not because danger has returned, but because familiarity has left. They were used to the noise. They were used to the tension. Peace can feel disorienting to a heart that learned to survive under pressure. My child, this is where trust is required again. Do not interpret the quiet as absence. Do not assume that nothing is happening because nothing is being forced. This shift is correction, not acceleration. Doors are closing without conflict. Paths are being redirected without argument. Conversations are being silenced before they can begin. You will not have to convince anyone of your worth. You will not have to defend your position. You will not have to revisit what hurt you. The realignment is doing that work for you. There will be moments when old thoughts attempt to resurface. Memories may try to pull you back into vigilance. When that happens, return to what you feel now. The calm, the steadiness, the sense that something has settled. That is your confirmation. My child, alignment does not rush. It stabilizes. Your soulmate is beginning to sense the absence of interference. They may feel strangely exposed, as though something that once buffered their emotions has been removed. This is not cruelty. This is clarity. Without the fog, they will begin to see their own choices more clearly. Without the noise, they will hear their own heart again. Without the pressure, they will realize what truly matters. You do not need to initiate this awakening. You do not need to remind them of the past. You do not need to reach out prematurely. Stillness is doing the work. This shift is creating a new baseline. One where truth can stand without being contested. One where decisions can be made without manipulation. One where connection can be revisited without distortion. Let yourself adjust to this new atmosphere. Let your body learn what peace feels like again. Let your spirit stretch into the quiet without fear. Nothing hath been lost. Everything has been repositioned. The shift you feel is not temporary. It is foundational. And from this place, truth will begin to rise. My child, now what was buried begins to surface, not through force, but through inevitability. Truth will not rush. It rises when the ground can no longer hold it down. You may notice small things first. A sudden message that was never planned. A realization that comes uninvited. A memory your soulmate cannot shake, no matter how hard they try to distract themselves. These are not coincidences. They are fractures in the illusion that once protected avoidance. The lies were never strong. They were only unchallenged. Now, conversations that once felt convincing no longer make sense. Advice that once felt wise begins to feel hollow. Stories your soulmate told themselves to justify delay begin to collapse under their own weight. They start seeing inconsistencies they previously ignored. Something inside them asks quietly, "Why did I believe that? Why did I wait? Why did I let that voice matter more than my own knowing?" Truth is not accusing them. It is inviting them. I begin connecting moments that once felt unrelated. The timing of certain distraction. The way certain people always appeared when courage was required. The pattern of reassurance that always followed hesitation. The picture becomes clearer, and with clarity comes discomfort. But discomfort is not punishment. It is awakening. They will feel a strange mix of regret and relief. Regret for what was delayed. Relief that the confusion is finally making sense. The weight they carried begins to shift from self-blame to understanding. My child, this is where evidence forms. Not dramatic proof, but undeniable clarity. They will realize that peace never followed the choices that led away from alignment. That contentment never arrived where it was promised. That the path that seemed safer only led to restlessness. Your presence will resurface in their awareness not as nostalgia, but as truth. They will remember how different they felt when they were honest. How grounded they felt when they did not have to pretend. How calm their spirit was when they were not running. They may resist this realization at first. Truth often arrives before readiness. But once seen, it cannot be unseen. Words that once carried authority lose their power. Influences that once shaped decisions lose their credibility. The internal narrative begins to change. My child, this is the moment when the fog fully lifts, when the battlefield becomes visible in hindsight, when your soulmate understands that what they experienced was not random struggle, but interference they did not recognize at the time. And with that understanding comes a sobering awareness. They were not only delaying destiny, they were drifting from themselves. This realization humbles them. It softens them. It brings them to the edge of a choice they can no longer avoid. They begin to feel the weight of what they almost lost, not as panic, but as reverence. The truth rising now is not here to shame. It is here to realign. And as it settles into their heart, something irreversible happens. They can no longer pretend you did not matter. They can no longer claim they were unaware. They can no longer hide behind confusion. The ground has shifted too much. My child, this is not the end of revelation. It is the threshold. What rises next is awakening. My child, this is the moment when sleep leaves their eyes and truth takes its place. Not all at once, not gently, but clearly. Your soulmate awakens to what has been stirring beneath the surface for longer than they want to admit. It does not arrive as confidence. It arrives as honesty. A raw awareness that something sacred was mishandled, not because it lacked value, but because they did not yet understand how to hold it. They feel regret now, not the shallow kind that fades, but the deep kind that settles into the chest and demands reflection. They begin to see how fear shaped their decisions, how silence cost more than confrontation would have, how delaying truth created consequences they can no longer ignore. They are afraid, not of you, but of having lost the right moment. There is a trembling inside them, a realization that time is not endless and destiny is not casual. They feel exposed, not because they are being judged, but because they finally see themselves clearly. The stories they told themselves no longer work. The excuses sound hollow in their own ears. They replay moments with you now, not to romanticize the past, but to measure what was real. They remember how seen they felt, how honest they were becoming, how your presence called them higher without demanding anything in return. And with that remembrance comes a sharp ache. What if I was wrong? What if I waited too long? What if I almost lost what was meant to change me? My child, this awakening is not comfortable. Growth rarely is. They begin to understand that you were not just a connection. You were a turning point, a mirror that reflected both their potential and their immaturity. Loving you meant becoming more, and that scared them when they were still learning how to stand. Now, that fear has nowhere to hide. They realize that the peace they have been searching for cannot be found where they are, that the noise they tolerated kept them from hearing their own heart, that the life they built without alignment feels strangely empty, even if it looks stable on the outside. There is a fear of losing you that sharpens everything. Not possessive fear, not panic, but the sober fear that comes when something irreplaceable is recognized too late. They begin to sense that you are not standing still, waiting, that you have grown, that you have been protected, that you may not return to what was. This awareness humbles them. They do not feel entitled to you. They feel accountable. My child, this is the first time they are not thinking about what feels safe, but about what is true. And truth has a gravity that cannot be ignored. It pulls them toward responsibility, toward courage, toward the possibility of reaching out without guarantees. They are not fully ready yet, but they are awake. They begin questioning who they have been listening to. They begin reevaluating whose approval mattered. They begin noticing how often they silence their own intuition. This awakening is quiet, but it is profound. It is the moment when they stop running and stand still long enough to feel the weight of their own heart. It is the moment when they realize that avoiding pain did not protect them. It only delayed growth. And now, standing in this clarity, they feel small but sincere, afraid but honest, unsure but willing. My child, this awakening is not for your validation. It is for their transformation. Whether they step forward or not, they can never return to who they were. The door to ignorance has closed. The truth has marked them, and that mark will guide every choice they make from here. You do not need to watch this closely. You do not need to wait anxiously. You do not need to interpret their silence. Awakening has its own timing. What matters is that they see now. And once seen, destiny is a way of drawing things back into alignment, not through force but through conviction. Remain at peace, my child. The awakening you hoped for has begun. My child, now I speak to you about the bond that was never severed, only stretched by time and misunderstanding. What is sacred does not disappear when it is tested. It reveals its strength. Even in silence, even in distance, your presence has been active. Not through words, not through effort, but through the purity of your heart. You did not chase. You did not manipulate outcomes. You chose integrity when confusion tempted you to intervene. And that choice carried weight far beyond what you could see. Your prayers, spoken or unspoken, reached places your voice could not. Your restraint created space for truth to emerge. Your love, untainted by control, kept the connection clean. This is the sacred connection at work. It does not bind through attachment. It aligns through resonance. Your soulmate's awakening did not begin because they missed you emotionally. It began because your energy remained truthful. Because you did not contaminate the bond with bitterness, accusation, or force. That clarity preserved the channel through which alignment could return. My child, understand this deeply. You were not waiting. You were anchoring. While they wrestled with confusion, you were being strengthened. While they hesitated, you were being refined. While they listened to noise, you were being protected from it. This was not imbalance. This was preparation on two different paths. Now those paths are beginning to curve back toward each other, not because of longing alone, but because truth is magnetic. You may feel a gentle pull now, not urgent, not demanding, but present. A sense that something is reconnecting beneath the surface. That is not imagination. That is alignment recognizing alignment. Your soulmate will begin to sense you differently. Not as someone they can approach casually, but as someone they must approach honestly. The dynamic has shifted. You are no longer in the same energetic position you once were. You have grown steadier. There, more rooted. The sacred connection will not rush reunion. It restores order first. Peace must be established before closeness can return. Truth must be honored before intimacy can deepen. Without this foundation, connection would collapse again. That is why the timing matters. My child, your role now is not to reach but to remain. Remain open without expectation. Remain grounded without fear. Remain receptive without self-abandonment. This bond is not sustained by effort. It is sustained by alignment. As this connection realigns, you may notice signs that feel subtle but meaningful. A sudden calm when thinking of them. A release of resentment you did not force. A sense of neutrality where pain once lived. These are markers of healing, not distance. You are not being asked to forget what hurt you. You are being invited to release what no longer defines you. The sacred connection you share is not fragile. It has endured pressure, delay, and interference. It has been tested and preserved. Whatever form it takes moving forward, it will not return to dysfunction. It will not ask you to shrink. It will not thrive on uncertainty. What reconnects will do so on truth's terms. My child, this is where trust deepens again. Not trust in another person alone, but trust in the process that protected you both. You are not behind. You are not late. You are exactly where you need to be. Let your heart stay soft but strong. Let your spirit stay open but discerning. Let peace remain your foundation. The connection is being restored in the right order. And from this place, reversal becomes possible. My child, now the night settles, and with it comes the final assurance you have been waiting for. Not reassurance born of hope, but assurance born of completion. The battle you felt but could not name has been handled fully, thoroughly, without residue. You do not need to remain alert. You do not need to stay emotionally armed. You do not need to anticipate the next disruption. This chapter has closed. What was assigned to disturb your peace have been dismissed. What was permitted for a season has reached its end. Nothing remains unresolved that could rise again later in another form. This was not a temporary pause. It was a decisive conclusion. Rest now, my child, without guilt. Rest without wondering if you should be doing more. Rest without fear that letting go will cause loss. Let your body sleep deeply. Let your thoughts slow naturally. Let your heart unclench. I am not asking you to rest because nothing matters. I'm asking you to rest because everything important is secure. Your destiny has not been compromised. Your connection has not been erased. Your future has not been endangered. What was delayed has been realigned. What was threatened has been protected. What was confused has been clarified. You will notice in the days ahead that you feel lighter without explanation. A joy returns in small, unexpected moments. That you are less reactive, less guarded, more present. These are not accidents. They are signs of a system no longer under siege. Your soulmate's path is now their responsibility again, free from interference. What they choose next will come from clarity, not confusion. From truth, not pressure. And whatever unfolds between you will unfold on solid ground, not shifting sand. My child, hear this blessing clearly. You are covered. You are guided. You are protected in ways you cannot yet fully see. No one can undermine what has been sealed. No voice can distort what hath been clarified. No delay can undo what has been decided. You are entering a season where peace is not something you fight to maintain. It is something that surrounds you naturally. Where love does not cost you your center. Where destiny does not require exhaustion to reach you. And if this message has settled your spirit tonight, if you feel the quiet confirmation in your chest, allow yourself to acknowledge it. You may offer a gentle sign of agreement, a sharing of this word with someone who needs rest as much as you did, or you may write a simple phrase in the comments that says, "I receive peace," as a witness to what has shifted. This is not the end. It is the beginning of a calmer chapter. Sleep well, my child. I am standing watch, and all is handled.